Hey, welcome back. What we're going to do now is we're going to use our JavaScript skills that we know so far and incorporate some new features and skills that we haven't really touched on yet to build something that is actually useful, that you can see, hey, JavaScript is actually useful. I could build something that is worthwhile, and I'm not just learning a language for no reason. You could see the practical application of JavaScript. So here I have a tip calculator that looks quite nice. I use some CSS to fancy it up a little bit so it's a little bit more presentable. But it can work without any of this. You could just have a bare bones tip calculator, but I wanted to make it look nice so it's kind of a bit more exciting to work with. So basically, this is just a tip calculator, and I use JavaScript to build a function. It's quite simple, actually, to calculate how much you should be tipping on your bill. So let me just show you how this works before we jump right in. So it's asking how much was your bill. So let's say your bill was, I don't know, $5.37. And you could choose here, how was your service? Outstanding, good, it was okay, bad, or terrible. And then those will have a corresponding value for percentage that you could theoretically be tipping. So let's say it was okay. And how many people were sharing the bill? Well, let's say there were 4 of us. So calculate. Tip amount, $4.70 each. So that is how much each person should tip. What if you said one person? Well, 1881. Do you see how it said each disappeared? What if you just removed that altogether? Same deal. Okay, what if we change the value of the service? Outstanding. 3761. And let's say it was terrible. And you were sharing it with 6 people. $1 for each. Pretty bad tip. But anyway, this is how it works. And you can see here, there's a couple extra things. So what if you just didn't add any values? What if you just had it just kind of be empty? We get an alert that says, please enter some values to get this baby up and running. Okay, well, what if we add, let's refresh here. What if we added a value here but forgot to add one here? Please enter some values to get it up and running. What if we had nothing here but something here? Same deal. And if we left this one as empty, it's okay because you don't have to have people sharing the bill with you. So that is how the tip calculator works on the front end. So why don't we jump in and actually start building it? So I created a new file called tipcalculator.html with a basic structure, hook in some normalized.css, and a custom styles CSS. So styles.css, create that file, or you could just go ahead and download it. So if you don't want to do CSS at all, and just paste it in there to follow along with the JavaScript. And with the script.js, I cleared that one out because previously it had some sample JavaScript in there, but I removed it, so we're going to start from scratch. And so that's what you need. You need those 3 files: HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Pretty standard structure for building something. Now, we also want to have some external JavaScript here. So at the bottom, so it loads last, we're going to hook in the script.js. So let's get started right away with the HTML. And we're going to blast through this fairly quickly because this is about the JavaScript and not so much about the HTML and CSS. So try and keep up. If you have any troubles, go ahead and just download the final HTML and CSS and just work with us on the JavaScript part. All right, let's go. We're going to add a div with the ID of container. And I like adding a little comment here at the bottom so you know where it ends. Level 1 heading, and we're going to say tip calculator. Below that, we're going to have a div, and I'm going to give it the ID of calculator. And I'm going to go ahead and add that comment again, so I know that that is the end of the div. And you can see already that it makes sense for me to do that because there's a couple divs, and once I start nesting all these divs, it can get confusing where the closing div is. Okay, next up, we're just going to add a basic form. I'm just going to say form. And inside the form, I'm going to start with a label, give some space, and I'm going to say, how much was your bill? And then I'm going to add a break tag after that because I want the input to display on the next line. Let's do a money sign, a space, input, and then type text. We also need an ID, and I'm going to give that ID bill amount. Okay, there's that first label. Next label. In here, I'm going to say, how was your service? Break tag. And we're going to add a select input. And that select input needs an ID as well. Service quality. And we're going to need a series of options in here. So the first one, I'm going to say option. I'm just going to have a couple dashes, space, choose an option. This just lets you see on the front end. The first option is just kind of a little bit of a label just to show you, hey, this is what you got to do with it, which means we need to make it not an actual option because we don't want someone to choose the value that is labeled choose an option. So I'm going to say disabled. Because we're using HTML5, we don't actually have to add an equals with parenthesis or the string. We could just say disabled. The attribute is just disabled. And then we'll also say selected. So this disables the option from being selected, and it is actually selected by default. So it's kind of a little funny, but that means it will show up by default, but you can't choose the option once you choose away from it. And the value, we need to add a value to the option so that JavaScript will know, hey, what's the value of this option? The value is 0. Okay, next we're going to add another option. This one's a little bit more simple. All you need to do is just put some text, 30% dash outstanding, let's say. And then the option value, we're actually going to use an actual numerical value here. And we'll say 0.3, which is 30%. For those math wizards out there. And we have another one. We're going to say 20%. And you could use your own values if you want, as long as you make the value correspond with what the label says. So it makes sense. We'll say good. And we need to change this value to 0.2. And we're going to copy paste. We're just going to change this to 0.15, which means 15%. And this will be it was okay. Another one, we'll say 0.1, which is 10%. Whoops, not 19. 10. And we'll say bad. Next one, we'll say 0.05, which is 5%. And we'll call this one terrible. So that's the select. We're going to move on to another label here. And this will say how many people are sharing the bill. Break tag. And we'll say input, type text, ID, total people. And then we'll say people at the end of that so that it has the input and then some text that says people just for some further help to for people to understand what they're working with there. And then we're going to add a button input. And we're going to say calculate. And then as attributes, we're going to say type is button, and the ID will be calculate. That's the end of the form. And now we just need to have a little spot that will give our little program here a spot to display how much you need to tip. So outside of calculator, let's give a div and the ID of total tip. Total tip. Okay, and inside total tip, I'm just going to do a little bit of HTML here. Sup. There we go. And this will be $. And that's it just brings the $sign up a little bit. That this stands for superscript, which means it's small text higher up on the line. And you can also have subscript, which will have it lower. So $signs typically are small little characters that are kind of higher up on the text. And you'll see that once we get to there. Span. And we're going to give this ID of tip because we're going to use JavaScript to select the value. So we're just going to put something here for now. I'm just going to say 0.00 because it's not going to show up. And then small, some small here. And then we're going to say each. We need to give that an ID as well. And we're going to say each. And that is it for the HTML. And why don't we just have a look to see what that looks like. And here it is. We have our HTML. How much was your bill? We have some inputs and everything just kind of looks a little bit haggard. And that's okay because we're going to use CSS to make it look nice. So let's jump into our styles.css and we're going to start styling it up. And again, pretty quickly because we don't really need to spend too much time on this. So body, we're going to select the body. And I have some images and stuff in the image folder, cutlery, paper pattern. We're going to use those. You could download those, but they're already provided in the course files that you downloaded earlier. So Let's jump into this. Background. We're going to give it a background of 333. We're also going to give it background image of image/cutlery.jpg. And that will be center positioned, center, and no repeat. Background size will be cover, so it covers the entire background, so it's not just constrained to the width and the height of the image itself, it's actually going to be the full size of the browser. And then we're going to go ahead and say color 532827. It's going to be a kind of a darker, I don't know, kind of like a burgundy color for the text. And then we're going to go down and select container. Now I'm going to make sure that I used a class there for that. ID of container. Okay, no, I need to select an ID of container. There we go. And in here, we're going to say width. We're going to give it a width of 400 pixels, margin of 40 pixels on the top, auto 0 on the bottom. This is going to center it in the middle of the browser. Padding, we're going to give it padding of 50 pixels, all sides. We're going to use some CSS3 for some box sizing so that we're not actually adding some width to the container with this padding, because right now, technically, the width would be 500 because we're adding 50 pixels on either side. Box sizing, and we're going to say border box, and that will keep it 400 pixels, and the padding will stay within the 400 pixel. Background, URL, and we're going to select the paper pattern. Top left repeat. That's going to repeat the paper pattern to have a kind of a paper texture. Box shadow. We're going to say 0, 10, 15, -8, and 0, 0, 0. And basically that's going to give us 10 pixels of box shadow on the bottom, 15 pixel spread, and -8. That kind of I can't remember what this one's called, but basically it's going to shrink it on the sides so you kind of have a cool little illusion. You'll see that momentarily. And now we're going to say the border radius. So we need to select WebKit border radius, 5 pixels. We also need to do Moz border radius, 5 pixels. And then border radius, 5 pixels. Text align, let's center everything. And then we're going to move down to level 1 heading. And we're going to say margin 0020. It's going to be 20 pixels on the bottom and 0 everywhere else. Padding, same deal, 0020. 20 pixels of padding on the bottom, 0 everywhere else. Border bottom will be solid 1 pixel DDD. Why don't we just have a look to see what this looks like so far? So we're getting there. The background's nice. We got a nice texture. We got the border radius. Colors are nice. We got a border, and now we just need to style up the form. Okay, so now we need to say form, and because we text aligned everything, I don't actually want the form to be centered. I'm going to say text align left. So I really only wanted the level 1 heading and the rest of it down here to be centered. The form, no. Form input and form select. I'm going to give some padding of 8 pixels and margin of 10 pixels and 0, so that's 10 on the top and bottom, 0 everywhere else. I'm actually going to select the form label too. And the form label will have display block, margin 25 pixels, 0, 25 top, bottom, 0 everywhere else. Font weight, bold. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and select the form input with the type of text. And that's going to look like width 90 pixels. The reason why I want to do that is because I don't want it to be as wide as it usually is by default. I want it to be smaller width, just because you're only going to add a few numbers there. You're not going to need to have it be a huge width. Okay, after that, we're going to style the button. So that would be BUTTON. And we're going to say background. We're going to go for 6C2726, color of white, border none, border bottom. So now we're going to style the border bottom now that everything else is gone. 222, solid 4 pixels, 222. Text transform, uppercase. Font size, 18 pixels. padding, 20 pixels, 30 pixels. Width, 100%. And now we're going to style the button in its different states. So we need to style the button hover. And that's going to be a background of 4C2827 and border bottom color of 111. And now we're going to style button active, position, relative, and then top 1 pixel. What that's going to do is when you click the button, it's going to just move down 1 pixel, and I'll show you what that looks like. See how it just kind of jumps down there 1 pixel when you click it? Just kind of has a neat little feedback when you click the button. Okay, now we're going to style the total tip. Font size, 50 pixels, margin top, 40 pixels. And then we're going to use a pseudo class to style total tip before. And this, we're just going to do a little bit of, we're just going to make it have some text to say tip amount. So we just need to say content and then tip amount and then font size, 14 pixels, font weight, bold, display block, text transform uppercase. And now we're going to select the total tip sup tag. In there, we're going to say font size 24 pixels and top 18, negative 18 pixels. That's going to show up like so. There it is. And you see tip amount shows up there. It's not actually HTML. It's showing up, it's been created by CSS. So it's kind of a cool little trick. Just to show you there. Now we're going to select the total tip small tag. I'm going to style that to have font size 14 pixels, font weight, bold, display block. And that is it for the CSS. Now our tip calculator looks as it should. Okay, so at this point, we've done the HTML and CSS, and we really just need to jump into the JavaScript. So if you skipped all the HTML and CSS, that's okay. You could download the HTML and CSS in the course files and just work with the next part, which is JavaScript.